Human Rights Watch says women and girls' rights continue to be trampled upon by Taliban authorities in Afghanistan. The group took over the country in 2021, imposing strict restrictions, including denying women their rights to education, work, movement and assembly. Media freedom has also been affected. For more on this, we're now joined by Human Rights Watch researcher in Afghanistan, Fereshta Abasi. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Perhaps for someone who has no idea, or for a woman that has no idea what other women are facing in Afghanistan, how would you describe a typical day for a woman in the country?
Thanks so much. It's a very dark anniversary. Tomorrow is the second anniversary of the Taliban takeover in Afghanistan, and it's even very difficult to imagine a day of a woman living under the Taliban rule in Afghanistan right now. As you already mentioned, women do not have access to most of their basic and fundamental rights, including right to education, employment, freedom of movement. And if you're a woman living in a village of Afghanistan these days, you're not allowed to travel without being accompanied by a mahram, which is a male blood related family member. You don't have any right to work. You cannot go to school or university. And you're being basically pushed back into the houses. And that's what the Taliban have done in the past 2 years. I regularly speak with women that are still living inside Afghanistan, and they're telling me that there is an atmosphere of fear and disappointment under the Taliban rule, and they cannot imagine to have a better future with the Taliban control in Afghanistan.
The very latest, we understand that the hijab and chastity bill was approved with 175 votes in favor. Under the legislation, women who failed to wear the headscarf could face up to 5 years in jail. Fereshta, your reaction to that bill being approved in the country?
The hijab restrictions, this is the regulation that the Taliban have imposed on women. It has been, it's very interesting to see that more than 80% of the decrees that the Taliban have issued in the past 2 years is to restrict women. And it's very valid to say that the Taliban are trying to control women and also control their bodies. I have been speaking to women in different provinces of Afghanistan, especially the female healthcare workers, for example, and they have been telling me that the Taliban have advised them and instructed them that they're not allowed to treat any woman who does not have proper hijab, which is shocking, because it means that if you do not have proper hijab, you could actually be denied having access to healthcare services inside the country.
To what end? Does the Taliban not want women in Afghanistan?
We don't know. We don't know what the Taliban want. I believe that a healthy mind cannot really justify what they're trying to do, but what we know so far is that they're an extremist group who are trying to restrict women more and more every day.
And so when you take a look at the response from the international community, or in some parts a lack of a response, what does it tell you? One of the things that I would like to say when you're asking about questions about the international community's response is that the way that the world responded to the conflict in Ukraine was amazing. It was fantastic. It sets a good example of how the world can actually get together and take enough and sufficient measures to respond to a conflict. And I wish that we could have seen that well for Afghanistan, beginning from with Afghan refugees. 2 years after the Taliban takeover, there are many female human rights activists living in third countries. And most of the international community countries actually, after the takeover, promised that they will resettle a number of Afghans. But that hasn't happened. The promise that hasn't been met yet. So I would say that if the West and the countries who have been engaged in Afghanistan in the past 20 years want to do something, there are many ways to fulfill this, and one of them is actually to resettle people at risk. One of them is to resettle people who are still at risk, especially women. Sure. What about the girl child in that country?
Sorry, I couldn't understand the question.
The girl child, if this can be meted out against grown women who can make up their own minds about a lot of decisions, a little girl who is growing up watching this, what does that do for them? Have we been able to establish what girl children are going through in Afghanistan? I mean, you can imagine, right, to see that if your mother cannot go to work I mean, one of the things that we need to highlight is the fact that these girls have seen their moms going to work and have seen their sisters going to school 2 years ago, and now it's a huge change for them. It's impossible to imagine a country to have a progressive future when women are not part of that. When more than half of the population is actually staying at home. They're not financially independent anymore. They're not part of any social life. And it definitely has a huge impact on children that are staying at home as well as their mothers and sisters. And it's not only about the girl child, so it's also about the boys as well. I remember that there was a video that have been circulated in the media that there was a maybe 10 years old boy who was crying because his sister couldn't go to school and he couldn't understand. He couldn't understand why and what is the reason. And he was crying because he wanted to take his sister with him at school because they used to go together. So this definitely have a devastating impact on the mental health of the family members.
Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Fereshta Abasi is a researcher with Human Rights Watch.